Good morning. Morning.
How difficult your computer is to use.
And we're using it because it's better than yours. Is that the reason?
Yeah, it had been. Mine.
Should we be on mute?
Yes, please. That would be great. We are going to begin in about 5 minutes. We just want to give people a minute or two to get settled, and then we'll get started.
So we could chat. Great
You
to
are-
see so
you
many
are-
people.
This is being recorded, so it's okay.
But it's
Okay.
nice to see everybody.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
I'm going to say hello to Tracy. Haven't seen you for a long time. Hi.
Hi, Judith. Nice to see you. I don't know, did Tracy hear you? Yes, she did. Hi, Tracy.
Mhm.
It's like information overload a little bit.
Wow, is it hard to connect to this?
Really?
I've been trying for several minutes.
Well, I'm not sure why that would be. I don't know.
Yeah, that join meeting didn't work for me at all.
Are you connected visually as well as hearing, Amy?
Yeah, now I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. It took about 6, 7 tries.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll start in a minute or two. Start at 10:35.
Been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Yes, we've been planning it for quite a while.
Yes.
You know, if we have a couple of minutes, there are a few people here that I've never met, and maybe other people haven't either.
Yeah,
I'm
I
thinking
agree,
about
Penny.
Leah, for example. Leah, I'm glad you're here. I don't know you at all. I'm Penny. I'm glad to meet you. Have you
Leah's a
just-
member of the Never Too Late to Be a Poets group.
Ah,
Right.
Mhm.
Anybody else see people they don't know very well?
lots.
I don't know Judith Sullivan.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, you're Judy Goggin?
The one who just spoke up is Jane Bowers. Judy Goggin is among the speakers and she's here.
Oh, okay.
Here I am. And so there's another Judy in the group. Welcome.
All right. Hello, Jane.
We will start. in a
Hello,
minute.
Amika.
Oops.
Whoops.
Some people we haven't seen much in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Vilma.
Good to
Okay.
see you all.
Good. All right, it's 10:35,
Yep.
and I know everybody's really eager to hear the wonderful presentations today. So we will get started. If you could mute yourselves, I would really appreciate that. And if you need help with that, I can mute you too. So thank you for doing that. And thanks for joining us today for Planning Memorials, Reflecting a Life in a Memorial Celebration. So my name's Jennifer Quinlan, and I'm the Member Services and Recruitment Coordinator for JP at Home. And JP at Home is a member-driven program of ethos and a village model for aging well and in the community. Members have organized a very thoughtful presentation for you today, and we have a wonderful turnout. And I'd say, even we have somebody joining us just now, Beth America. Let's see, hang on a second. I want everybody to be able to come in and join us. Great. So really, it's almost all members, so I don't need to give a big pitch on what this program is all about. I think you all know and you all love it, and so glad you're here. But there are a couple things I want to make people aware of. We do have an information session next week on Tuesday at 1:30. And that is also on Zoom. So we welcome you to tell your neighbors, tell your friends, and to send me an email to register. Please do that. Leah, if you're in the area and you want to get more information, please come along to that. Another wonderful opportunity coming right up on the 25th is Porch Fest in Roslindale. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and that's at 4:30 on the 25th. You are encouraged to come, bring a friend, bring your chairs, so you have a place to sit. And it's going to be a great time. And I think that it's such a good thing to do now. You know, when we have to social distance, let's get out as much as we can together. So looking forward to that. So I'll put my email in the chat for anyone that might need that. I think you know, you're going to get a good sense of JP at Home either way during this presentation, because everyone here is a member who will be presenting today. So we are recording the program, and we'll stop the recording at the end of the presentations. We have about 45 minutes of presentation, and then we will stop the recording so that you feel comfortable asking your questions and joining the dialogue. So we look forward to hearing your questions. If you don't mind, you can try to hold your questions to that after 45 minutes when we're done. That would be very helpful. So Jane Bowers is our wonderful host today. So we're very happy that she's helping us with that today. She serves on the Advisory Council of JP at Home, and she's also part of a wonderful group that has been offering us many presentations in recent months on end-of-life issues and death. So we're very grateful for all the work that they've been doing. Very brave, important work that is really making a difference. So without further ado, I turn it over to Jane. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for all your technological expertise, which gets better and better with all the Zoom meetings we have. We are mostly members of JP at Home, and I'm glad to see you all. I'd like to thank the group that has put this together. We had a committee with Fern Beschler and Amy Pett and me, and we called on Toddy Gottlieb, who is the head of the Single Events Committee, and she helped us in putting it together. After a death, there's memory. Stephen Petro recently wrote in the Washington Post, "Grief can keep lost loved ones close to us, close and alive in our hearts." In recognition, sometimes there's a traditional funeral, sometimes there's a memorial, often both. For many people, planning a memorial is a way of remaining close to the person they have lost, reviewing their lives in full rounds, sometimes even when they've been a difficult final chapter. Memorials can happen shortly after a death or quite a while after. Some people facing death find comfort in designing a memorial for themselves. A person can be memorialized more than once. Memorials can be held where the death happened or in another place important to in that person's life. They can be designed by the deceased or by the person who will become the deceased. They can be small or large, by invitation or open to all. Today's program is a time of reflection. We have two presenters who are going to reflect on their experience designing memorials, Judy Goggin and Fern Beschler. And we have David Malone, a clergyman who has spent many years organizing and managing memorials. We'll hear from them about their experience. They'll talk about things that went well and things they wish they had thought about differently. But it's not a how-to. We're going to raise issues that come up, like food and complicated family dynamics and locations and technology. But basically, the reason for this session is to reflect on the reasons for memorials and their meaning. So at the end, as we say, we welcome questions and answers. You can put them in a chat, but we'll address them after the presentations. And now I turn this over to Judy Goggin.
Thanks, Jane, and hello to all of you that I know, and also hello to those of you that I haven't had the chance to meet in person yet. I look forward to that soon. Because many of you know the story, I will briefly just explain for others what my situation was that led me to, become a project manager of this memorial topic. My husband, Emmett, who died in August of 2019, just 2 years ago, lived for 9 years with a diagnosis of Lewy body dementia. And about a year before his death, when he became enrolled in Mass General's palliative care program, he began to talk more about the fact that we had made lots of arrangements except for what he called post-mortem arrangements, which was a little bit stark for me to listen and hear that. But he had an idea that he wanted to talk with Deborah and David Malone, who are both on this Zoom, because he had learned that they had made some pre-arrangements. And so he asked me to invite them over, which I did. And they shared with us the things that they had done ahead of time for each of them. So what we did based on that discussion was to, in advance, make arrangements for cremation and cemetery arrangements. And we just had, the four of us had a broad discussion about service or memorial, though none of us at that point had made any concrete plans about what we might want to have. After Emma died, since we didn't really have very many advance arrangements, and I didn't have much guidance from Emmett, I was pretty much left to my own devices to put everything together. But after 47 years of marriage, I think that what we did wasn't far off from what he would have chosen for himself. So in terms of what I'm going to do is cover what we did, and then when I finish these various kind of more practical topics, I will talk about some reflections of my own about how things went. So in terms of timing our remembrance of Emmett, about 4 months before he died, he was in hospice, and the hospice chaplain kept very gently asking me if I had given any thoughts about how I was hoping to remember and honor his life. And I have to say that during that time, I just was not at all in the mood to think about or talk about that, and wasn't even remotely able to do much about it. So that time passed still without any arrangements. So as it turned out, we waited about 6 weeks after Emmett's death to hold a celebration of life. And the timing was primarily aligned with family members and their travel schedules. So looking back, it was really good to have that kind of time to decompress from all that we'd been through, and then take time to talk things over, make decisions, get coordinated. It also presented an opportunity for people to step forward and offer to help. We have talented friends, we have a large family, and it was really gratifying to see how many people stepped up to say, I'll do this, I'll do that. And it left me just making decisions rather than doing the work, which I greatly appreciated. Even my sister, who lives in Seattle, offered to coordinate all the arrangements for people who were traveling. She found Airbnbs in Boston, and she made up a giant spreadsheet of who was arriving when, and that kind of help was just immense. So as some people know, I'm from a huge family, so not everyone has that benefit. And but yet it was wonderful to have only those things to do that people needed my final decisions on. So our two adult children did a lot of the logistics and planning. They both do that kind of work for their own jobs, so that lifted a burden. And again, if there are plenty of people who have skills, and I say reach out and say yes to any of them who step forward to offer. It's a lot to do. Choosing the venue was a little complicated because we wanted to have enough space and have it, as it turned out, we held it at the Unitarian Church in Brookline. Now, some people might already have an affiliation, but we didn't have an affiliation with that church. And it turned out that they're very experienced there in renting out their space for these kinds of events. And what we ended up doing was, partly after looking at the space that they had available, we planned both a small, intimate liturgy and service in the morning for about 100 people, mostly close friends and family, people who were traveling. And in the afternoon, we opened it up. Well, we didn't open it up. We used a separate space. They had a small chapel. They have a huge sanctuary, but a small chapel, which we used for about 100 people who were part of the liturgy. And then they had a large social hall with a commercial kitchen attached to it that we used for an afternoon event that was more social and informal. And it was more like an opportunity for people to drop in and pay their respects. So between those two rooms was a real nice little lounge for kids that we set up for small children to be able to participate, but not be right in the thick of things. And they also even offered us a childcare space they had in the basement and swings outside that really was way beyond what we expected. There was only one issue related to the facility, which was parking. There was no parking of any size, but the church folks told us that the city of Brookline was pretty good about it, just allowing people to park on the street where normally it's not allowed. And we conscripted some younger family members to just give people directions as they were arriving. So the venue turned out to be very important just because it gave us a lot of flexibility to do what we ultimately decided to do. And they were also very welcoming to the Catholic priests that we invited to do the service. They offered us access to their musicians, which we used. They had fabulous audio, visual, and recording equipment. So that turned out to be a decision made by us on having what we had because the venue was so well equipped to do it. What took a lot of extra work that I was grateful that we had friends and volunteers to step up and do it was writing Emmett's obituary, printing a booklet for the celebration, and we ended up deciding to do a little bookmark honoring Emmett that we gave out to everyone who came. So we had talented friends who did all of that work for us, and it wouldn't have to turn out to be as nice as it did turn out to be, but again, we were lucky that we had people to help us with that. So for the morning part of the event, we chose a celebration of life theme for the whole day, and then in the morning was a service where we had music and a liturgy and an opportunity for people to speak very briefly. I asked a good friend of mine who's an experienced facilitator to invite comments at a certain point during the event, but he was also given instruction to use his best skills to keep it brief and not overwhelm the service with things going on too long. And in the afternoon, I have another family member who's also a skilled facilitator. And what she did during this open house event more like an open house event. We didn't have a receiving line. We didn't have any kind of a formal program. People just came. We had enough tables and chairs for people to sit and visit in groups. And my family and I were free to just wander around and visit with people individually or at those tables. But every 30 minutes, she had a bell, like a cowbell, she would ring and invite 2 or 3 people to come up and say anything they wanted to say, that speaking about Emmett, a story, or some traits of his that they admired. And so it was informal but structured, and many people chose to do that, and only 2 or 3 people spoke each half hour. And then it helped for people who were, it was a 3-hour long period of time, so people could come in, visit, say hello to us, say something if they wanted to. We had food and beverages available, but there was no program or anything formal that people stayed for over any length of time. So I ended up focusing my time on the morning service because I wanted it to reflect Emmett's entire life, and I felt like I was the only one who could do justice with that, given his spiritual sensibilities that I knew of and followed through with him, and just reflecting over his 7 decades. So that's where I put a lot of my time and attention. We ended up putting together a video montage that my skilled son put together. It covered old pictures, remembering his time also in his Catholic youth and his 10 years as a Jesuit seminarian. I chose the music, the musicians, the officiants for that part of it, the readings, and asked specific friends and family members, especially the grandchildren, to participate during that time. So that was where I put most of my time and energy. And I was, my 2 adult children were extremely happy to give that over to me. They didn't want to be responsible for that part of it. And I was very happy to give the afternoon session over to them. So I did very little to organize the afternoon session. Actually, just a kind of as an aside, it turned in the evening, or we served lunch. We served a catered lunch for the people who were attending both events, the morning and the afternoon, which was mostly the people from out of town. And then in my family, whenever we have funerals or weddings or some family gathering, we always seem to end up either in a bowling alley or a tavern after it's all over on the same day to decompress and just sort of hang out together. So my family, after all of this, left those 2 events and went off to Doyle's, where we rented the back room. And I didn't stay till it closed, but most of them did. And it closed we closed Doyle's in more ways than one, I say, because it was only 3 days later that Doyle's announced that they were closing forever. So my family's pretty happy and proud of the fact that they helped close Doyle's, even though before they went there, they didn't even really know what it was. So that's what we did. And then just quickly, I'll just say for kind of tips or things I've thought of, I'll look at my notes here, is like, if you can do advanced planning, do it, but obviously it can be done without it. But if you can sit down and talk about things like we're doing here, actually, is like before you really need it, to talk about and think about either what you might like or what someone you're going to be doing a memorial for might like, because it'll really help when you're not just starting from zero. And of course, as others have said, this timing of when you do it is really open, I think, these days. Unless there are religious protocols to be followed, you could pretty much wait as long as you need and make sure you have the time to do things the way you want and to figure things out. So I'm happy that that's how things have been going lately. The venue, it was interesting that the venue was so important. I never anticipated that, but in fact, it ended up helping us plan what we wanted to do once we saw the physical space and could think about what we were doing, what we ended up doing. And then I'd say, again, I've said a few times already, you know, hand things off as much as you can and trust people to do a good job and try not to meddle. The only time I meddled was with the video when my son showed it to me, and he had some of the photos out of chronological sequence, and I said, please change this. And he didn't want to, but he said, no one's going to notice. I said, I'm the only one who will notice, so please change it. And he did. So just make sure you don't give up things that are really important to you, and that you're clear with people about what is important, what you want. And then just let people go with it. And I think you'll be happy with the results. The other final thing I'll say is, like, be careful after things are over not to look back and dwell on anything that didn't go exactly right or regrets that you have, because the spirit of the day will really carry everything. And people are there for reasons to honor your loved one. And in the end, you know, the thing to focus on is the spirit of what took place and how much it meant to everyone, including you. So that's it for me. And I look forward to hearing questions and hearing the other speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Judy. And our next presenter is Fern Beschler.
Yes, my name is Fern Beschler, and it has been 3 years since my husband died, and since we did I think in a very delightful way, quite a different memorial, having attended Judy's and having learned a lot from hers. Much of what Judy has presented is what I would also recommend in terms of trying to pull from previous experiences or having conversations beforehand, if that's possible, of what would suit your loved one best. Edwin and I had already had several conversations during our life together, 45 years. And we had both been through good and awful funerals and ceremonies of passing. So when you go to something like that, it's sort of natural to sort of talk about it, and you get a sense after a long time of knowing somebody what they would like. And we had found that for us, cremation was the way to go. We both felt that way. And Edwin had already told me that he didn't have a preference about his ashes, about what would be done with them. I knew that he, like me, didn't want a formal funeral. And we shared the attitude that we were no longer believers in religion, neither the one he was raised in, Presbyterianism, nor mine, Judaism. We had sort of made up our own religion, and we had a strong spiritual feeling that tended to go toward helping those who could most benefit from our help, allow the universe to go forward, and to deal with what came our way as best we could. I had been married to Edwin for 20 years before I realized that he was actually a kind of a natural Buddhist who lived quite a bit in his own head. His diagnosis of vascular dementia in his early 80s was the one event that he was unable to cope with in his usual calm style. We had lived in a small carriage house in Jamaica Plain for 12 years before we moved to an apartment in Spring House. When the stairs in our carriage house became too much for us, and the lack of a bathroom on the main floor was a singular deterrent for us. Our timing was really good. Edwin had a chance to make friends, and become accepted into the senior independent living community there, or here, I should say, since I'm still living there. It was very good to be situated before Edwin began to go seriously downhill. I had an additional trial, and that was that the man I married was slowly becoming a different person. This may happen a lot, but I was in shock when it happened to me. And I was angry and got angrier as time went on. And I realized that I had shifted to being a caregiver and not a wife. So I was left upon Edwin's massive stroke and death in 2018 with not only the work of putting together a memorial, but my angry feelings still going strong. I had a very dear friend who offered to assemble a photo montage of Edwin's life if I would send him the photographs. So really, the act of going through our stacks of photos began the work of dealing with my feelings. I realized by looking at our photographic history that we had had a wonderful life together, that we had totally loved each other. And the man who I had been left at the end with was not the real Edwin. But it took me 2 years to be able to be comfortable with how things finished. The memorial I arranged for Edwin took place over a long holiday weekend, well more than a month after his death. So he died at the end of April, and this was the Memorial Day weekend. I wanted to give people a chance to travel and have that extra day on the weekend, even though I didn't actually expect too much in the way of travel. My focus was really on local people. It is important to give thought to your target audience. In my case, I planned it for the largest public room at Springhouse, where I had decided to continue living. I billed it as a dance party to honor Edwin Beschler, who loved to dance, and thought that it would be mostly local folks who would attend, aside from Edwin's 3 children, whom I knew would be there. I meant it as a celebration of his 86 years of a very, very interesting life. I worked with our kitchen and chef to organize the food, mostly wine and beer and finger foods that would fit on a small paper plate. Timing was set for 1 p.m, and I arranged for the photo montage of Edwin's life to be running during the entire time. I think I spoke, but I have absolutely no earthly reason to remember what I said that day. And a lot of that day remains a blur even now. I do know that since then, I have regretted not opening things up a bit for folks to talk about Edwin. I think that would have been meaningful. It has been so meaningful for me to hear other people's memorials where that has happened. So that was a regret of mine that you might make note of. I was surprised that I had several family members who traveled to get there out of sheer affection for Edwin, which was lovely. It was quite informal, which was what I wanted and what I know that Edwin would have wanted. We did have music, although nobody really danced. I know that I felt once that the event had taken place, we were onto a new plateau, and that would be in terms of my dealing with the whole experience. The official goodbye having been said. And within the next 2 years, I worked on moving past my angry feelings And yes, 2 years is what it took for me to really accept Edwin's final exit, that his behavior toward me during his dementia was not the same man who had really loved me deeply for 40 years. After the memorial, I flew to Houston and Philadelphia, delivering a portion of Edwin's ashes to his sister and his favorite niece. My daughter objected to splitting up his ashes, but I overruled her because I just knew that Edwin would have wanted his sister to have them as well as his niece. I kept a portion of his ashes for myself to bring with me to Florida that year, where I always share a few weeks with my sister. And together we scattered those ashes at a special tree in the garden of local family. I knew Edwin would approve. He loved our time in Florida together. The half of the ashes that were left were given to his 3 children to decide what to do about. And that summer, I rented a house in Fire Island, New York, a place that was especially dear to Edwin's heart. And all 3 children, plus my 1 grandson, scattered them into the Atlantic Ocean one very beautiful summer's evening at dusk. It was so touching and just right. Each action that I took along the way helped to memorialize the husband, father, grandfather, brother, and uncle that we had all lost. And each piece helped me find my way through as well, so that now, over 3 years later, I am able to remember the wonderful life we had together and to find a life for myself going forward without the anger I had at the beginning of the process. So if you have some questions, please make sure you put them into the chat.
Thank you, Fern. Thank you very much. And next we have David Malone. The Reverend David Malone. Who is now.
David, can you please unmute yourself? Thank you so much.
Okay, here I am.
Greetings.
Got it?
Yes.
There have been people who wanted to mute me in my life. So in doing this, I remember some important people whose ends I saw: my father, my mother, my kid brother who was killed in the Peace Corps, Deb's father and mother, and a little teenage girl who died almost alone in 1972 in Pittsburgh named Sarah Matchett. But my real introduction to dying was not as a professional clergy person, but as a 16-year-old high school junior in upstate Rome, New York, when my father suddenly became overwhelmed at age 55 with what was an untreatable cancer. Afflicted when driving from a business meeting in Baltimore, operated on at Syracuse, opened and immediately closed, and sent home to die with my mother and 2 young siblings. I spent the first semester of my high school junior year sharing what would now be called hospice care with my mother 24/7 for 5 months, until the day in January when I held his hand at 7 a.m. as he died. And my life was never the same. It was in that experience I decided to become a clergy person, not to teach truths, but to confront and comfort suffering. Of course, many funerals followed over the 40 years of my career: babies, young mothers, teens suiciding, or gang violence, or cancer. Sweet old people, kind of like me, maybe. Each one has been different, personified for the people involved in the community we shared. I had a prayer book, but not a tablet of stone. Each memorial was individual and personal. You know, perhaps it would be better if I were not here today, but were replaced by a funeral director. Surely everyone should have such a person in their lives, pre-need, as that profession describes it, to assist, advise, make arrangements, and file the legal paperwork. Be sure you have such a person in your life right away. Deborah and I do. Brady and Fallon over on Tower Street in Forest Hills, prepaid 10 years ago. and his place at the Forest Hills Cemetery Cremation Garden, paid for 10 years ago. But I was asked to be here today as a clergy person in the Christian tradition. One thing I learned along the way, particularly when I was a pastor of Cambodian Buddhist Christian immigrants in Lowell, is that in the Abrahamic Western traditions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, while a single divinity or God may be central, much more important is the community called congregation, a community of folks whose beliefs and practices may be all over the place, for better or worse, but who hang together and care and support of each other when the chips are down and suffering emerges. Whether you're religious or spiritual or not, identify your community of support or start creating it. I think both Fern and Judy talked about that with their family and dearest friends. There are many of my colleague clergy, rabbis, priests, monks, imams, or pastors, who are for hire, do funerals for anyone, knowing them or not. They do it by rote and a holy book. They take money. I never did those things. I did funerals or observances with people in my community, people I knew, and folks with whose families I was in relationship. The events varied from traditional to innovative, but they all had this in common. They were personal, very personal. The shape and structure was fluid, but they all represented a knowing of each other. For myself, to be personal, two things were always present for me in my practice. They won't be for you, but they were for me. The first was the reciting of the Hebrew 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," which I saw as an ancient promise that all would be well and safe, whether the all was something or nothing, somewhere or nowhere. All was well, period. And then the offering of an old World War II Scottish prayer, which to this day I especially love, and goes, "O Holy One, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen, the busy world is hushed. The fever of life is over, and our work is done. Then in your mercy, grant us safe lodging, holy rest, and peace at the last." Those won't ring everyone's spiritual bells, but they ring mine. I hope you find yours. A friend this week earlier talked from Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, a paragraph that rang their bell. Or it may be a piece of music, Beethoven, Brahms' Second Symphony. Or it may be a letter from your grandmother. Find your words and your community. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. So we are now ready for questions. Some of you may have put questions in the chat. The chat is open. You can do that. And Amy Pett is going to help us with calling forth questions that are on the chat. You may also raise your hand and we'll call on you.
And at this point in time, I'll stop the recording. And I invite you to